Hi there, this is Kevin from maximizingecommerce.com, and I help people start and grow e-commerce businesses. And in this video, we're going to talk about some basic terminology for importing and sourcing of products, just some basic concepts and some terminology that should help you along the way. So why is this important to know? Well, for one, it helps you be more confident when you're negotiating with suppliers because they're going to throw these terms at you and they're not trying to like stump you or anything. It's the lingo, it's the tools for the trade. In every industry, there's certain words that people use. Maybe it's just to see that the other person knows what they're talking about. So people throw out these words, or they just get so used to using them in their day-to-day conversations with the people they interact with that they just expect everyone knows these terms. So we're throwing out some terms that should help you with those. Also, if you're doing research, sometimes while there's blog posts or podcasts or YouTube videos or whatever it is you're reading, there's going to be terms thrown out there, and just understanding those terms helps you better understand the concepts that are being presented to you. And also, if you're in a discussion in a Facebook group or a forum, it helps you better involve yourself in that group, as well as so you can better ask questions or just join in the discussion because you understand the lingo and the terms being used. It just helps you be more confident. So where do you find products to sell online? So for one, you could go to trade shows, and there's trade shows all over the United States, all over Europe, all over Asia. Trade shows are everywhere where you could find suppliers to potentially work with. One of the biggest trade shows, if you're sourcing products from China, is called Canton Fair. And there's a lot of people that talk about Canton or Canton Fair, and it's a very large show, happens in multiple phases. It fills up this entire huge conference center and or convention center, I should say. And they have to go in different phases of basically suppliers come in, suppliers come out, and then, because they can't fit everybody in just one session. So it's pretty crazy. So also, you could deal with agents. So sourcing agents are people that can help you with your sourcing of products, and they typically work with factories, or you could work directly with the factory. And factories, you may think like, well, they want to deal with someone who's maybe just starting out. They really don't care. I've found is they just want to work with someone who's going to be a good partner and who's going to pay them for whatever it is. So at the end of the day, they want to work with online sellers, and they're finding you don't have to just work with Walmart and Macy's and the big companies, that there's all kinds of people looking to purchase products. So factories are getting to be pretty, especially Chinese factories I found are very willing to work with sellers that are looking to buy in smaller quantities, well, relatively smaller quantities. All right, and then also there are some online marketplaces like Alibaba. So the marketplaces are a way that you can find these factories and agents, and we'll go over that here in just a second. So what are some of these major online marketplaces where you would go to find the sourcing agents and the factories? Well, one of which is going to be Alibaba. So Alibaba is definitely probably the most known. They have a lot of suppliers on there. There's different ways you can vet suppliers relatively quickly to know that the company is legit. Alibaba, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. It's basically it's almost like the Amazon or eBay for sourcing products. Then there's Global Sources. Now, Global Sources has got a smaller network of factories and sourcing agents and suppliers than, say, Alibaba, but they're a little bit more vetted. There's more hoops that they have to jump through to get on Global Sources. Both of them, I think, have a good place in going out and finding suppliers. So don't be afraid to use either. I think I've always had good experiences on Alibaba, just because they're more vetted on Global Sources doesn't mean you can't find good suppliers on Alibaba. And there's a lot of people that really sing the praises of Global Sources. So both of them are good places to find someone, especially if you're looking to private label or do an OEM, which is basically creating your own product. Then there's AliExpress. So AliExpress is basically like Alibaba Lite. It's more, I would say, sourcing agents than, or the mix of sourcing agents to factories is going to be higher sourcing agent on AliExpress. Basically, you can find companies are willing to sell in smaller quantities on AliExpress. Now, the catch with that is there's probably less customization they're willing to do on smaller quantities, and it's easier for other people to go out and buy small quantities too. So you're more likely to have others kind of knock off what it is you're looking to do. So AliExpress, I think, has a place in doing product research. I haven't been a huge fan. I've been more of a, just go on Alibaba, find somebody that's willing to work with your budget, whether it be number of products or number of um, or amount of money you're looking to spend, amount per unit. I mean, typically you can find good factories that are willing to work with relatively smaller MOQs on Alibaba, but AliExpress sometimes you can buy like literally one. Now, you're going to pay a little bit more for it, but I'm more of a fan of Alibaba and then bringing over those units over. That's my personal preference. Then there's ThomasNet. ThomasNet is kind of like Alibaba or Global Sources, but it's pretty much all American-based companies. And whereas Alibaba is mostly Chinese-based companies. Now, ThomasNet, some people have luck on ThomasNet. Typically, the suppliers on there I've found are looking for people or suppliers, or excuse me, or sellers, online sellers that are going to buy larger quantities than, say, Alibaba. And well, I think depending on what your strategy is, if you're looking for, made in the USA, ThomasNet would be the way to look at it. All right, so let's talk about some terms that may come up in negotiation with suppliers. One big one is going to be MOQ, minimum order quantity. So suppliers may want to work with you on maybe certain pricing levels depending on what your MOQ is. So if your MOQ there's 200 or 500, it might be a different price. Or if it's 2,000, it might be a much lower price because they're giving you a bulk discount. Also, if you're on, let's say, Alibaba, it might say that their MOQ is 1,000 units. Well, I wouldn't be afraid to ask for a smaller order quantity if that's what you're looking for. And if you want to work with 1,000 and that works for your numbers, then go for it. But when in doubt, especially if you're first starting out, I would recommend trying to get a smaller MOQ, especially as a test order. And that's not uncommon for people to ask for. So don't be afraid to ask. Worst case scenario, they're just going to say no, because there's some factories that really only deal with the Targets and the Walmarts and the Macy's of the world, and they want to do larger quantities. That's fine. There's also a lot of factories that have their niche in working with smaller companies, and that's great too. So you're only going to know if they're going to work with your smaller MOQ if you ask. So don't be afraid to ask. Then payment terms. A lot of times you hear people talk about 30-70, so 30% down, 70% when it ships. Especially if you're doing smaller orders with a first time order on a supplier, they're going to want you to pay 100% up front. That's not anything to be alarmed about. I do it all the time. I've, knock on wood, not had any bad luck. It's not that they're trying to steal your money and run. Believe me, they want to work with you and they want a good relationship with you. So if you do just a little bit of vetting of your suppliers, which we can talk about in another video, you're going to have pretty good luck. So I wouldn't worry too much about being asked to pay 100% up front. It's not uncommon, especially starting out. So another concept is going to be freight forwarder. Sometimes I hear suppliers talk about their shipping agent. So basically a freight forwarder is someone who handles the logistics of point A to point B. Air shipping can be, depending on what type of air shipping, can be relatively easy. It just goes from point A to point B and just lands at your door. But sea shipping especially can be a little bit more complex. And we'll talk about those here in just a moment. But freight forwarder is someone that handles all those logistics. And then also shipping costs. So I would recommend, especially starting out, ask your supplier if they can quote shipping for you. So we'll talk a little bit more about making sure you're on the same page based on certain terms. But the shipping is something that they're going to most likely get better discounts on because they do this more often. So if you're first starting out and you go to UPS or DHL, you're probably not going to get as favorable rates as your supplier because they're your suppliers. If they've been doing this for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, they've sent out a whole lot more packages to the United States, to Europe, to South America, to wherever, and they're more used to sending things out. And so they've been able to get better discounts because they have better bulk in sending things out. So I would definitely ask them for shipping. Now, also keep in mind, if you're on like Alibaba, it's customary that whatever that price is does not include shipping. So if it is, let's say the MOQ is 500 and it's $5 a unit for a product, well, that doesn't mean it's going to be $2,500 to get it to your door. I would almost double whatever the price of the product is as a general rule of thumb. It's not exact, but at least it gives you a basis to kind of work off of. But it's probably going to end up being about double that price once you start factoring in, especially if you do air shipping. Now, how do you pay your supplier? So, for one, you could use PayPal. PayPal is generally going to be used more if you're doing samples, and your suppliers, chances are, will ask you to pay for samples, and that's totally normal. And PayPal, the challenge with PayPal is that PayPal, whoever receives the money, pays PayPal or has deducted out certain fees to receive the money. So suppliers, you're generally run with pretty thin margins, so they don't want to lose out on if it's like, let's say 5%. I'm not sure the exact number, but if let's say it's 3%, 5%, whatever it is that PayPal deducts from the money they receive on your order of, let's say, if you're sending them $5,000 or $2,000 or whatever it is for your first order, they're not going to want to take PayPal. I mean, it's pretty much across the board. They don't want to take PayPal. They probably want to do what is called a wire transfer. So wire transfer is just a bank transfer. Sometimes it's referred to as TT for teletransfer, or telegraphic transfer, which sounds like, literally like they're doing it in Morse code. But it's basically just, it goes over the wire, and your bank is giving instructions to another bank that says the money is going from point A to point B. So once they hit submit, the money's no longer in your account, and it's then going into the other account. Now, one thing you might see, like I see this a lot in Bank of America, whenever I go to do a wire transfer to another company or another country, China and Hong Kong tend to be what you would call slow to pay countries. So they may not see the money right away in their account. So sometimes they may hold off a couple days, a couple business days before their bank recognizes the transfer was received. So don't panic if that happens. That's normal. Bank of America at least will give you warning of that. And even if I've gone into the bank and given instructions to the person who's helping me do the transfer, they usually give me a heads up on that, but that's totally normal. Also, there's another way to pay called Alibaba Trade Assurance. This has become a way I like to do it, especially if I'm using Alibaba, which is one of the reasons I like Alibaba, where basically it's much lower fees, whereas a wire transfer fee might be $45 from bank to do an international transfer. Trade assurance might be like, I want to say if you use e-checking, it's like $10. It's much more economical because especially if you're doing a smaller order, the difference of $35 could be a big difference. So I would definitely recommend setting up on Alibaba. Now, to get that, there's a couple different ways you can do it. One, you can use credit card, but just keep in mind, Alibaba is going to charge you a fee, and then also you're going to charge an international fee most likely from your bank. So I would recommend don't use credit card. Use e-checking. Now, it may be a little disconcerting at first, like, okay, but if you have to put in a routing and account number, which is stored on Alibaba, is it safe there? I would say so. Alibaba, one of their successes has also been called Alipay. And Alipay is, from my understanding, very similar to what PayPal is in the United States. Alipay is in other countries, like China. So it's a very secure system. um, I would feel relatively comfortable using Alibaba Trade Assurance and using the e-checking format there. And you can save a bit of money doing it that way. And also, too, with trade assurance, if the goods never ship, then as long as you go about it a certain way, you'll get your money back. So also, your suppliers don't want to lose their trade assurance status. So if they have the ability to do trade assurance, that's usually a good sign, even if you don't even use trade assurance. Then also there's Western Union. So I've not used Western Union, and I never hear anyone say anything good about using Western Union for this purposes of paying suppliers. Western Union is a legit company. There's nothing wrong with Western Union. It's just you have the least recourse with Western Union going to other countries relative to, say, PayPal or a wire transfer. Um, so wire transfer, once the money's been received by the other account, then you really don't have a lot of recourse, at least with your bank. But I think one of the major differences, and I could be wrong on this one, if you make a mistake on a wire transfer and, like, let's say you put the wrong name of the company, I've had wire transfers get sent back to me. Now, granted, they deduct a fee for sending it back to me, but at least I got my money back because I put in like an ampersand, the and symbol instead of and, because that was the way it was, and the bank rejected it. Whereas I don't know that that happens with Western Union. If it doesn't get to your seller or to the supplier, they don't care. They need their money. So where it goes with Western Union, I'm not as familiar with that. I'm sure there's probably ways of doing it. Now, PayPal and Alibaba, there's some built-in protections with both of those. So my preferred method is to try to do Alibaba Trade Assurance, and I've found suppliers are very much okay with that, especially if you're finding them on Alibaba. All right, so let's talk about ways of getting the product from another country, so let's say China to the United States. So one is going to be sea shipping. Sea shipping is going to be the most economical for the shipment itself. Now, the thing about sea shipping is there's a lot of hidden costs. So the actual putting it in a container, like in the picture there on the side, putting it into a container and having it go from port to port, so like to have it go from Shenzhen to Long Beach, California, that's relatively inexpensive. The expensive part is going to be once it's received, there's all kinds of different layers of companies that are going to be receiving the product. Customs wants money. There's going to be processing fees. All these things that happen at the port get to be pretty expensive. And the thing of it is, unless you're doing a larger order, those costs kind of become a fixed cost. So if you're doing a larger order, you're spreading that fixed cost over more units. So per unit, it's less expensive. But the fixed costs involved with sea shipping might be the same, relatively the same, regardless of whether it's 100 units of a product or 3,000 units of a product. So of course, if you're doing 3,000 units, you're spreading it out over many, many more units. So it gets eaten up, so to speak, or the costs get eaten up more quickly by all those units, or I should say incrementally, it's much less. So then there's air shipping. Now, air shipping technically would be like if you found somebody on Alibaba that did air shipping, and I mean like an actual air cargo company, and you can find cargo companies on Alibaba. But if it went from, let's say, Shanghai to Dallas, that's it. So what you really want more than anything is air express shipping, or sometimes referred to as express shipping. I didn't really understand what that meant. So I remember suppliers kept telling me, oh, it's going to be this amount for express shipping. And this is the first time I was doing this. I thought they were like trying to upsell me on like faster service. So I was like, well, I don't know that I need express shipping. But then I started to realize what express shipping simply means is, let's say, I live in Florida, in a relatively small area, not too far from Orlando, a couple hours away from Orlando, a couple hours away from Miami, about an hour and a half from Fort Lauderdale, about an hour from West Palm. So those are all international airports where the plane might land with the goods. Well, I'm not going to take a truck to those airports to go pick it up. So express shipping basically means door to door. So it could be point A to point B in a airplane, and then it could be that from point B to point C, it's on a truck to actually do the final part before it gets to the destination. So express shipping is what you probably want to ask for. It helps you sound a little bit more like you know what you're doing. So you might want to ask a supplier, hey, can you work with the MOQ of 200, and can you also quote me express shipping to whatever your zip code is. So if you're in the United States, give them your zip code so that way they can pretty accurately quote you shipping. Now, there's also a very important term to know called Incoterms. And Incoterms, it's a set of terms used pretty broadly in the shipping industry, set forth by the International Chamber of Commerce. So that basically, if you have two different parties in other countries where they might speak different languages, at least natively, that both parties can be on the same page, so to speak, as to what the terms are of shipping. So we'll go over a few basic ones. So one is going to be FOB, and that's going to be a very common one you're going to see, which means free on board or freight on board. Technically, what that means is that included in whatever the price is will be getting the unit to the port. So if wherever the port is, whether it's Shanghai or Shenzhen or whatever, the port where it's leaving, the price includes getting it to the port. And then technically, legally, the purchaser, so the online seller who's buying these products, takes ownership once it gets to the port. Then there's EXWorks, EXW. That basically means the price includes, they box it up, and then they don't pay for anything else. So the shipping would not include anything from the factory. So, or the price would not include any shipping or shipping baked into the price from the factory. So oftentimes EXWorks might be like if you're doing express shipping, and let's say UPS is picking it up. So if UPS is picking it up, it would technically be EXWorks. Sometimes I see they still quote it as FOB, but it's about the same thing. If they do quote it as FOB, you may want to ask them, well, what would it be if it's EXWorks? Or sometimes FOB might be that they're paying to get it to the airports, and then UPS picks it up from there, or whatever the case is. So you may just want to ask that question, because sometimes FOB pricing is going to be more expensive, or typically FOB pricing would be more expensive than EXWorks pricing, because they're paying for it to get on a truck somehow. Then, more relating to sea shipping is CIF. So it's the cost for insurance and freight, and really carriage of it. And then so the cost of paying for the carriage, the insurance, and then the freight costs. So basically they get it to the boat, and then it's pretty much the boat on over to the destination port, and then you're pretty much picking up everything else from there. Then there's just carriage paid to, which is similar, except they're literally just paying for the freight costs of getting it from port to port, but it doesn't include insurance. And then there's DDP, delivery duty paid, where they're paying all the duties on the destination side. It's almost all inclusive of everything involved in sea shipping, but it's never. So I would always recommend, especially if you're doing sea shipping, get a couple quotes from a couple different freight forwarders and have them help you with what other costs might be involved. And you're going to find that oftentimes, especially if you're working with a freight forwarder, it's a good idea to probably do FOB or EXWorks pricing on the factory side, and then let the freight forwarder handle everything. This is more on sea shipping. And then if you're going to do air express shipping, I would just ask your supplier to quote it as FOB or X Works, and then either way, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. Of FOB getting it to the airports, or getting it to the or just that they have somebody pick it up. Either way, whenever they quote you the shipment from point to point, it's probably going to end up being about the same. But if they're paying for someone to pick up, sorry, if they're quoting you shipping where it's whatever the shipping price is includes someone picking it up from their factory, you don't want to also pay for FOB for them to pay for it to go to the airport. So you just maybe want to clarify that. But either way, FOB or Xworks is probably what you're going to use. All right, so here's a few helpful hints. So suppliers want to work with online sellers. It can be intimidating reaching out to these folks and feeling like you have to make yourself feel a lot bigger than you are, make them think that you're the next Macy's or the next Walmart or Target, but you don't. They want to work with smaller online sellers. Also, focus on win-win negotiations when dealing with suppliers. I mean, this is something that ideally you find a good supplier, you're going to want to work with them and buy future orders from them time and time again. And at the end of the day, both parties want to make a profit. And you want to try to work on it so they win, but also you win. But both parties are winning in the negotiation. Also, try to get multiple quotes. Never fall in love with the first supplier you talk to. Try to get multiple quotes. So if you're getting a product, I would start reaching out to 20, 30 just to see who are ones that you want to work with. Are they responsive? Do they seem to be understanding the questions you're asking? I mean, generally speaking, especially if you're dealing with a Chinese supplier, their English is going to be better than your Chinese, which may not always be the case. Maybe you speak fluent Chinese, but most of the time, even if it seems fairly broken English, they're going to speak English better than you speak Chinese. So always give them a little bit of grace is my suggestion. But by getting multiple quotes, you're going to be more likely to find a company that you want to work with. Suppliers also usually have better express shipping pricing than what you can get on your own. So I mentioned this before, always try to get the express shipping quoted from your supplier. And if you do ask for it, make sure to tell them your zip code. So that way they can give you pretty accurate pricing. So hopefully this helped you clarify a few new terms. And if it did, I would ask you to give a little thumbs up for the little like button down below. Also, if you could subscribe to our channel. By doing both of these, it helps people find the videos, and hopefully we can help other people in the future. And then also, if you could leave a comment, you can ask any questions you have. We do our best to try to answer as many questions as possible, and we do try to read all the questions at very minimum. And also, if you want more exclusive tips, go to maximizingecommerce.com and you can sign up for exclusive resources and tips and updates to help you on your journey. So more than anything, just want to thank you for being on this video today, making it all the way through to the end, and have a great day.